Xi Jinping promised a new China dream, but a decade later, it's all crumbling. Welcome to China Uncensored, I'm Chris Chappell. When Chinese leader Xi Jinping first came to power, he talked about a China dream. You know, like the American dream. Even the China dream was a cheap Chinese knockoff. Cheap knockoffs are a feature of communist systems. Individual initiative and entrepreneurial spirit are discouraged by the whole killing you and stealing your stuff. That's not a Chinese thing, that's a communist thing. China had 5,000 years of being one of the most innovative countries in human history. China is kind of like Pizza Hut. It used to be awesome, then a new regime came in, changed the recipe, got rid of the salad bar, and now I spend all my time ranting about how we need to go back to the way things were. Anyway, like most cheap Chinese knockoffs, the China dream is falling apart. Xi Jinping said the China dream was about pushing forward the great cause of socialism with Chinese characteristics and striving to achieve the Chinese dream of a great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. And a key part of that was his Belt and Road Initiative. I'll let this video from Chinese state-run media explain it.
The belt connects to land, the road moves on the sea. The promise that they hold is joint prosperity. The future's coming out. The belt and road is how.
Haunting. It's like Baby Shark if the sharks were told if they didn't sing, their fins would be cut off and put into a soup. Sing, sing like you mean it. So to provide a bit more detail, the Belt and Road is a $1 trillion global investment program, offering loans for construction to developing nations, things like roads, hydroelectric dams, etc. Those loans made Beijing the largest government lender to the developing world by far, with its loans totaling nearly as much as those of all other governments combined, according to the World Bank. Over the years, we've seen just how disastrous the Belt and Road has been to any country that signed a contract with the CCP. Kind of like a deal with the devil, if the devil were less handsome and charismatic and bad at playing the fiddle. Many of these countries ended up in crippling debt. Belt and Road loans played a part in the economic collapse in Sri Lanka and Zambia. The projects have also caused a lot of environmental damage. The WWF has listed over 1,700 critical biodiversity spots and 265 threatened species that will be adversely affected by the BRI. Wow, I never knew the WWF cared so much about the environment. Snap into a plant-based Slim Jim, oh yeah! And apparently the great cause of socialism with Chinese characteristics involves a lot of human trafficking and forced labor. So yeah, things aren't looking good for the Belt and Road. But when I said the China dream was falling apart, I meant literally falling apart. A lot of these mega projects are absolute wrecks. I've seen Jenga towers on rowboats that are more structurally sound. I'll show you how bad it is right after the break. Welcome back. This is a Chinese-built hydroelectric plant in Pakistan. Now, according to the World Bank, hydropower plants can have an operational life of 100 years. And yet, just 4 years after it went operational, Pakistan had to shut theirs down after detecting cracks in a tunnel that transports water through a mountain to drive a turbine. Pakistan is currently in the midst of an energy crisis, so being stuck relying on a broken Chinese hydropower plant turns out not to have been a good long-term strategy. The Chinese firm has since abandoned the project. Not because they screwed up, no. They said it's because of local protests over the plant and the failure of the Pakistan police to offer credible security. Why are there protests? Who knows? It's a great dam. Stop asking so many damn questions. Here's a Chinese-built hydropower plant in Uganda. Guess how it's doing? It was shut down after finding more than 500 construction defects. People are panicking over only 500 construction defects? Yeah, this definitely isn't China's fault either. It's all those whiny dam protesters. As for the other Chinese-built hydropower plant in Uganda, it's 3 years behind schedule, a delay that Ugandan officials have blamed on various construction defects, including cracked walls. The government had to start paying back the $1.44 billion it borrowed from the Export-Import Bank of China to finance the project, even as the plant remains inoperational. China also built this vast housing project in Angola. It was funded by a $2.5 billion loan from China. 10 years later, many locals are complaining about cracked walls, moldy ceilings, and poor construction. Honestly, at this point, I'm starting to wonder if the walls crack after construction or if they're just built using pre-cracked walls. The Chinese construction company is blaming the locals. Obviously, those locals can't appreciate the cracked wall aesthetic. I mean, what's wrong with a crack house? Oh, now that I've said it out loud, I get it. More recently, China has been making a big push to expand its influence in Latin America. And Ecuador has been on the forefront. That means lots of Belt and Road construction. And it's probably worse than you can imagine. I'll tell you why after the break. Welcome back. So you're probably thinking, how could these Chinese construction projects get worse? What? Is there an active volcano involved? That'd be ridiculous. Actually, no, there is an active volcano. I'll get to that one in a minute. Now, as I mentioned, China has been particularly aggressive in Ecuador. A lot of it began after Ecuador suffered a sovereign debt default in 2008. At the time, Ecuador's far-left president, Rafael Correa, decided it was time to team up with like-minded communist China. In total, Chinese banks lent Ecuador $18 billion during Mr. Correa's term. Maybe that wasn't such a good idea. Because Ecuadorian lawmakers, former government ministers, and anti-corruption activists say the loans lacked transparency, with contracts given to companies without public bids, resulting in shoddy construction, high costs, and graft. By the way, did I mention Correa was later convicted of corruption? Wow, he and communist China really were like-minded. I wonder if he also blamed this all on those damn protesters. So let's talk about some of these Chinese projects. One was a giant metropolis that was supposed to be Ecuador's Silicon Valley. I'm showing you an illustration of it because despite a $200 million loan, the project has been abandoned, along with a $6.3 million supercomputer sitting out of doors and unused. Wait, they've got a giant supercomputer just sitting outside? Shelley, I think I have an idea for our next China Uncensored road trip. It'll be just like that game Stray, which I talked about on our new gaming channel, Gamers Unbeaten. I'll put a link below. Ecuador has other problems as well. There are some 200 Chinese-built schools, many with faulty foundations, slanted floors, and exposed cables. Considering how China builds schools in China, I don't think anyone should be hiring Chinese construction companies to build them in Ecuador. That'd be like seeking marital advice from O.J. Simpson. And then there's the active volcano and the hydroelectric dam China built right next to it. It's called the Coca-Cola Sinclair Hydroelectric Plant. Not to be confused with the Coca-Cola Sinclair. Yes, I am willing to stretch to make a reference to Babylon 5, the greatest show ever. Since opening in 2016, this hydroelectric plant has become Ecuador's biggest source of power. The Coca-Cola Sinclair Hydroelectric Plant is a $2.7 billion project. So you might think it would be well made, if you haven't been paying attention to literally everything else I've said so far. Well, this Chinese-built dam already has thousands of cracks. And by thousands of cracks, I mean they've already found 17,000. Faulty steel imported from China, it seems. Also, tangent, who counted all those cracks? I assume someone super paranoid about breaking their mother's back. And even if the cracks don't destroy the dam, all the environmental damage it's caused could. The dam has sped up the erosion of nearby riverbanks. According to one geologist, the erosion is a process that would normally occur over thousands or millions of years, but the dam has accelerated it in just a matter of 5 years, leading WWF stars to say, "Oh no!" The erosion has already destroyed roads, oil pipelines, even Ecuador's biggest waterfall. And it's also wrecking a nearby town that sprang up to provide for Chinese construction workers, including a brothel that was apparently pretty popular with both Chinese and Ecuadorian workers. The things that bring people together. No one knows how long the Coca-Cola Sinclair will last, but when it goes, it will be a disaster. As one engineer told the Wall Street Journal, we could lose everything. And we don't know if it could be tomorrow or in 6 months. So remember, folks, no matter how good a deal communism seems to be up front, it will always cost you everything in the end, no matter what you're told by singing children who are clearly under duress. And China Uncensored would not be possible without support from viewers like you, either by liking and subscribing, sharing the show with friends and family, or buying one of these awesome She the Pooh t-shirts from our merch store. Buy them with the link below. And of course, a special thanks to everyone who gives direct support on our crowdfunding website, Patreon. Those are the fans I call the China Uncensored 50-cent Army, who join us in the fight against the Chinese Communist Party. And as a thanks to them, I respond to their questions. David Michael White asks, Chris, what's your favorite piece of Chinese literature about the heavens? Ooh, very interesting question. I'd have to say it's Investiture of the Gods, sometimes translated as Creation of the Gods. It's about the overthrow of the corrupt Shang dynasty and the rise of the Zhou dynasty, but set to a backdrop of epic cosmic battles between the forces of good and evil. It's where the famous story of the fox spirit Daji comes from. This has to do with the heavens because ancient people viewed the stars as gods, and this is a story about how some people are elevated to godhood for their heroic deeds. In other words, it's not a story my Catholic school teacher, Mrs. Thornycroft, told me about. Thanks for your question and your support, David Michael White. And thank you for watching. If you want to support China Uncensored, all it takes is $1 or more per episode over at patreon.com/China Uncensored. China Uncensored would not exist without your support. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.